For over 40 years since the beach enclosures, well over 100 heritage railways have been opened in the United Kingdom. Their tracks laid over more than 400 miles of the old British rail routes. One of the first to reopen in 1970 was the Severn Valley Railway that we are going to feature in this documentary. This is Kidderminster Station in Worcester, which stands at the southern end of the 16.5-mile stretch of reopened track. From here, the trains follow an extremely picturesque route along the Severn Valley to Bridgnorth in Shropshire, the line's northern terminus. Between these two terminuses, there are an additional 8 stations. This is Bewdley. Every year, the Severn Valley Railway put on many special events and galas to raise money. Today, the line is remembering the important role the railways played in the Second World War. So while we continue to look at the features of the line today, I shall try and give you a brief account of the history of the Severn Valley Railway from its conception to its closure in 1963. The Severn Valley Railway, that originally ran between Worcestershire and Shropshire, opened in 1862. This was the time of railway mania in Great Britain, following the success of the Stockton and Darlington Railway, opened in 1825, and the Liverpool and Manchester in 1830. During the years of Queen Victoria's reign, a web of railways spread across the land, and just as quickly became accepted as the preferred way of travel by most, even though there was undoubtedly a certain amount of risk in travelling by this new and revolutionary method of transportation. As more and more lines opened, the stagecoaches that covered similar routes immediately became a thing of the past, as did most of the river, canal and coastal traffic, the railways providing a quicker, cheaper and more comfortable alternative for travelling, as well as for hauling freight, thus changing for the better the way of life for almost everybody in this country. So let's go back and look at the beginning of the story and see how it all began. And to be honest, when I was researching the history of this line, it made me wonder at times how it ever opened at all. It was July 1853 when the first of the Severn Valley Railway Acts was passed by Parliament without division, and it received royal assent on the 20th of August. But before this was achieved, there were many problems for the directors to overcome. The year before, in the Severn Valley Railway Coast Prospectus, issued in July, it proclaimed the line will accommodate a country entirely without a railway, and where the want of one is severely felt. The whole produce of the district being now mainly dependent for its transport upon the navigation of the Severn River, which above Stour Port is at all times difficult and uncertain. The capital it was estimated the company would require to complete the project was £600,000, and to raise this, 30,000 £20 shares were to be issued. At first, application for the shares was good, and the board had no fear of raising the necessary capital. The directors, however, wanted to give preference to persons residing locally to the proposed line, but from this area there was little or no rush among the investors. The bill for the railway was deposited before Parliament for consideration in November 1852, along with the accompanying deposit of £90,000 paid into the Bank of England. By April 1852, the list of petitions against the bill was complete. Some of these came from obvious sources, others I found quite interesting, which is why I have included them here. The obvious memorials were from railway companies in direct or partial competition with the proposed line. These included the Shrewsbury and Chester, Shrewsbury and Birmingham and Shrewsbury and Hereford railways. The Shrewsbury racecourse also had a petition, but their objection was easily solved. The proposed line was planned to run across one of the track's points of access. The promise that a footbridge would be erected solved this problem. The trustees of the Shrewsbury, Wenlock and Bridgnorth Turnpike roads were also bought off with £2,500. This was to pay for a stretch of road to be diverted where the railway would run next to it. The petition was based on the claim that passing trains would have terrorised horses and travellers alike on that section of the road. Another more amusing petition was entered by Robert Woodward, who had recently purchased Arley Castle. He told the directors of the line he would drop his complaint providing that all trains would stop at Arley at the request of himself, his children or his wife, provided that the station master had half an hour's notice. For all those against the line, there were many more in favour of it. They looked forward to improved communications with the north, Liverpool docks for example. A direct line would reduce considerably the time and cost of transporting goods. For example, the owner of one company based in Stourport that employed 120 and who imported raw materials from Ireland by the way of Holyhead, said the delays in changing from rail to canal at Wolverhampton caused a 10-day delay on each of his shipments. Pierce Boardman, an iron founder employing 250 men, also in Stourport, used 1,000 tons of raw iron and 2,500 tons of coal and coke each year. He spoke of similar delays and argued that a direct link with the Shropshire coalfields would enable him to obtain better and cheaper coal more quickly. Some argued the Severn River was a satisfactory means of transport for the valley. Others pointed out its hazards and uncertainties. It was said a 70-ton vessel could frequently not take more than 15 tons because of the lack of water. Property values was another aspect that was taken into account. The argument here was that wherever the railways went, they brought prosperity, and prosperity was followed by an inevitable increase in local property prices. In the end, as I said before, the first Severn Valley Railway Act was passed without division in July and received royal assent in August 1853. This act was in 54 sections, these covering matters such as the capital of the company, defining the agreed route. It also set out the rights and obligations in relation to landowners and other railway companies affected by it. The share capital was described in the prospectus with powers to borrow on mortgage or bond up to £200,000 once the whole capital had been subscribed for. Section 39 of the Act provided that the powers of compulsory purchase under the Act should expire after 3 years from its passing. Another section stated that the railway, branch and works shall be completed within 5 years, that is to say by August 1858. Within 2 months of the Severn Valley Railway Co's incorporation, it already began to look for economies, for example, sharing existing stations and track with other companies wherever possible. Money on the money markets had suddenly become scarce, and the question that began to be whispered was, would a rail ever be laid? A letter from Sir Morton Peto, who, with his partners, were to be the contractors who would build the line, and had also secured £47,250 of the parliamentary deposit, illustrates quite well the situation the company found itself in at the time. It was written in November 1853 and began, "Gentlemen, you will feel my interest in the Severn Valley Railway a sufficient excuse for my troubling you." This, of course, is a reference to the £47,250, a huge sum of money in those days. He went on, "I am most anxious that no expense of any kind should be incurred until we are really in a position to proceed. You have an abundance of time, and if we are kept from beginning for the next 3 years, we can then open it long before the Act required. I need not impress on you the present state of the money market, or the political condition of Europe. You know it all too perfectly well, and I am confident you will see the propriety of the course of action I advise." The board replied to Peto's letter on the 12th of November 1853, in effect agreeing to everything he said, and that they did not intend to proceed with the works until they were in a stronger position. In consequence, some of the staff were dismissed and salaries were cut. Even so, the records of the company show that loans of considerable amounts, considering the size of the company and the situation it found itself in, were being borrowed on short-term agreements. In 1854 another bill was prepared and was scheduled for consideration by Parliament on the 17th of March. In the new bill, it laid out changes the board wished to make to the course of the line. Capital was also an issue, owing to the lack of it. But what caused most indignation amongst the shareholders was a clause the board had included continuing the directors in office until the completion of the work. On the 11th of August 1854, a very irritated Sir Morton Peto wrote, "The state of the company is so serious and so at variance with my engagement with you, that I have no alternative than at once to place my interests in the hands of my solicitor. I also beg to give you notice I shall oppose the bill you have now in Parliament to make the office of directors permanent till the works are complete, and that I will call public attention to such an attempt to deprive shareholders of the due right of representation." Peto received a reply to his letter dated the 13th of April 1854. With regard to the director's appointment until the works were complete, it explained, "I beg to inform you that the solicitors suggested the insertion of such a clause, and that the board assented to it only on their recommendation." Peto wrote again saying, as a large shareholder and unlike most, more or less fully paid up, and that his prestige in such matters as the construction of railways would ensure that his opposition to the bill would not go unheard, should it be necessary for him to put his views forward. What resulted from this bitter correspondence was a fascinating compromise, for Sir Morton Peto was elected as the director of the Severn Valley Railway on the 3rd of May, and he would soon become chairman. 5 days after Peto joined the board, on the 8th, the bill was withdrawn. 10 days after that, 2 of the directors, who had hoped to retain their jobs till the works were complete, resigned, and they were replaced by Walter Jackson, an MP. It was then Peto became chairman, a position he held for 3 years. When Peto did finally resign the chair, he was convinced that the line would certainly be completed, although many of his colleagues still gave it little chance. During Peto's time as chairman, his main contribution to the company was the planning and content of the Severn Valley Railway Acts of 1855 and 1856. The principal objectives of these new acts were to cut costs and to fix capital at a more realistic level. Costs were to be